my understanding for what he said, and you can look at the video, was well, conservatives encourage men to step up and kind of take responsibility for many problems in the world, fair, and step up at times of war. That then sent me on the trajectory of, okay, well, if we don't encourage men to step up at times of war, what do we do if we're, for example, invaded by Russia?
Yeah, I
And I
think that's
didn't
a
get a
fair.
response on that.
I think that's a
Yeah.
fair characterization when I was watching it. So you guys were talking. The interjection began with the idea of horseshoe theory. So
Okay.
what Brian would make the same point that I would here, I think. But to characterize that argument correctly, the idea here is that both conservatives and progressives, when it comes to the social issue of the interdynamics between men and women, they often will characterize responsibility as being male only and then kind of evade any accountability or responsibility for social issues when it comes to women. That seems to be shared by both conservatives and liberals when they, like the hardcore liberal feminists, in other words, they're going to say that all social problems essentially are going to be laid at the feet of men. Interestingly enough, I've noted that most of the modern conservative movement, like TPUSA and others, say the exact same thing, that modern social dynamics are only messed up because men are doing something incorrect.
Right now.
Yeah. Did you hear that? Warning, you want me to repeat it?
Yeah, I heard that. Do you have
Okay.
like an example of something just so I can get a sense of
Yeah,
what you mean?
yeah. So, uh, progressive feminists will say that the reason that women needed to have equality is because men were keeping them downtrodden and they were being highly oppressive towards them. What conservatives will say is that unless men uplift women using our benevolence, that basically women are still in this same oppressed status. So they're both essentially saying the same thing, just from two separate angles.
Hmm.
Women oppressed, men bad, essentially. And if you're going to have an oppressor oppressed class, it's easy to break these social dynamics down by race and age and other things like this. But if you say women as an entirety are oppressed, well, then who are the oppressors? It's going to be men, right?
Right, right. Yeah, I
So
don't think women are oppressed.
yeah, right, exactly. But
Yeah.
when conservatives say unless men are doing X, women aren't going, women are staying in the oppressor role or oppressed role, and if feminists are saying, well, women are in the oppressed role as a natural consequence of just male behavior, it's a very similar worldview. In other words,
Okay.
yeah.
It's interesting.
So
Thank you.
so horseshoe theory is going to start. I guess the theory works like this: the middle of the horseshoe is longer than as the horseshoe comes up, it curves inwards, right? So
Hmm.
it begins to get closer to itself. So right in the center is when the space between both sides of the horseshoe is the widest. So as we go up, meaning we go deeper in the ideology, the horseshoe begins to bow in slightly. The ideologies begin to come closer together. That's what the reference was with horseshoe theory. So he's
Mm,
saying these two ideologies, he doesn't see a huge difference between the two.
gotcha. Yeah, I've heard Shapiro talking a lot about horseshoe theory conservatives lately. I was like, oh, that's what Brian was talking about with the horseshoe, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure what Shapiro is referring to, but I get you.
Yeah. That's the general idea. It's just that the further apart you get from the center, the closer some of the ideologies begin to overlap. And this kind of makes sense in a way because, as you know, you're a logician, I believe, right? Or I don't know if you label yourself
Amateur.
that way, but
No, I wouldn't call myself that.
like as somebody who delves into logic,
Hmm.
uh, almost all ideologies begin to have overlap at some point when you begin to
Yeah,
reduce them, right? And so
I agree.
it seems like the further you go along the road of any individual ideology, the closer you start to come into contact with overlapping ideas. And so I think that that's what happens when you begin to get really to the far right or the far left. You begin to see more overlap at that, or of those ideological overlaps.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. I've been noticing that in some areas.
Yeah, so I guess that was the I guess that ultimately was the point that I was after, was like I thought that the criticism against Brian, I essentially thought it was kind of an unfair criticism. Now, to be upfront, I always appreciate the videos you make of me. I think that they're very kind-hearted, and also, to be as biased towards myself as possible. They make me look pretty good, right? So I like that. Of course, I like that. Um, but on this one, I thought that it was kind of an unfair categorization of his argument, and I didn't.
Mm, gotcha.
That's all.
Which part do you think was unfair?
Yeah. So I think that what you did in the video, and this is getting, I don't remember the exact time marks, but again, I just watched it like one more time before I went on stream. But I think that as you moved, when Brian was explaining male disposability, you kind of somewhat moved into an argument about war, and when is it the case in war
Mm.
that that men have to kind of step up for these greater duties, when it comes to this idea of disposability? Well, Brian's kind of counter here was like, well, wait a second. While I can grant that there's going to be a necessity in war for sacrifice, I think that most men don't ever get any of that glory. They just, they're shot. That's the end of it. They don't. They don't get any of that glory. And so he's saying it seems like they're utilized in a disposable role, even then, when there's the promise that glory could be there. And it seemed like the refutation that you were giving didn't have anything to do with that argument, but whether or not it was actually necessary if that be done, which I don't think addresses the disposability issue itself.
It was because of the horseshoe comment came up, and he didn't really explain it as definitely not as eloquently as you just did. That makes sense what you're saying. So I was like, what? So in my mind, it sounded as though if you encourage men to step up at times of crisis and war, and this filtered into the draft, and he was made it clear he was against the draft, um, and my question was, well, okay, but if we're not encouraging men to step up, we don't have a draft. What do we do in the very unlikely chance that we are invaded? And that's where it about, well, men don't go to war for glory. I'm like, okay, I get that. What does that have to do with anything, though?
Yeah, I think that from that angle, he's specifically focusing on disposability, like the. So if we're
He
talking
wanted
about
to, yeah. Go
yeah, if
ahead.
we're talking about these various, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut in if I am. There's just
It's
a
all right. Don't
really
worry about it.
bad delay on this end. Sometimes you just freeze up and I just can't hear anything. So I do apologize for that. If it sounds like I'm cutting in, I don't mean to. I want to listen to everything that you're saying.
I could tell you, I was just gonna say, like, I wish Brian would just have a conversation with me about it. I get that he was pissed. I can understand that people don't. It's Yeah, criticism sucks, and I get that. But yeah, I offered to talk to him on the phone, talk on the show, and he just stopped responding. The only time he did respond, he was like, "Hey, can you call in like 15 minutes because you were on the show?" I understand he wants me to talk to you, but we can. It's difficult to filter through someone else's mind through someone, but we can talk about what Brian was thinking.
Well, okay, I think that that is fair. Obviously, I can only characterize what I see. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? The same way when you're giving a criticism of Brian, you are kind of filtering it through his mind. I'm just kind of doing the same thing externally, but filtering it through both minds that I'm in. I'm interpreting what both of you are saying, right?
All right, I'm back. Sorry.
No
All right,
problem.
what are you saying?
Oh, I was just saying, kind of the same way that you have to interpret what's going on in Brian's mind in order to formulate your argument. I'm just doing the same thing.
Hmm.
I'm just
Okay.
interpreting what I'm seeing through the, and good interpretation or bad interpretation. I guess I think it's a fair criticism to say, well, Andrew, you can't really come on and make Brian's arguments for him. That's unfair. I
It's
think that
fine. You
that's
can.
reasonable. But one thing I did want to convey that I did want you to speak to is like the appearance there. It does seem very snakish, doesn't it? Like the idea that you're invited on the show, you give you're kind of giving your commentary, this and that, and then bam, this video comes out. If you were Brian, wouldn't you feel a little bit blindsided by that?
Interesting point. So if one of the girls on that panel were to do the same thing and post a video, would Brian feel that that was snakish?
I don't think so.
Why?
So I think that the purpose here is that the entirety of the show is set up for the contrast of ideologies. And I even think that it's fair that you criticize Brian's ideologies. I do that often, right? Uh, But I think that Brian would say if a woman came out with a video that unfairly characterized something, I think that he would definitely have issues with it and say that there was snakish behavior and everything. But if they came
Okay.
out with a video that fairly criticized Brian, while I think he'd be upset, I'm not sure he'd see it as snake-like, you know?
Okay. But what was unfair about my video then? Because we just went through that.
Well, I mean, I think that the video itself strawmanned his position pretty hard.
I did say that Brian said that short of a one-to-one representation of an argument would be a straw man. That's the problem with people throwing that term around. But like, where am I? Sorry, can you hear me okay now?
I can now, but I actually didn't catch anything you just said.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
it's all right. I know I admit, like I said, Brian basically said conservatives are feminists. It was actually similar. That was the correct wording. Often in these videos, I'm thinking out loud in real time.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be, sometimes there are going to be suboptimal summations of the argument and anything. The problem is today people are throwing around this term of straw man because anything short of a one-to-one representation is technically a straw man. And so Brian texted me that, and my response is, I do the best I can. It's like, he was like, well, why didn't you steel man my argument? Honestly, I don't even know what the steel man would be to what he was saying, because he was talking about things that seemed completely irrelevant, like we were just pointing out. Now, some of the comments on the video helped me better understand what the steel man would be, and you've helped me better understand that, which is why I suspect he would rather me speak to you than to him. But I'm not sure where specifically a straw man is occurring beyond what I just said.
Well, I'm willing to grant that there could be some technicals around the idea of a straw man, where if it's not a like direct one to one to the argument, everything is a straw man. But would you agree with me that there's going to be degrees to that? Like,
Sure.
yeah, so
I do my best for
you
sure.
could definitely straw man something way worse, or
Dude,
misrepresent it way worse.
yeah, I can understand why Tim Pool, for example, would be pissed about that, because when we're making an argument, if someone were to have any editing and interjecting with thinking out loud, which is what I'm really doing, it's like I'm not, which is sometimes why it's not a steel man, because I'm literally watching the video in real time, and I will pause and just say what I'm thinking in one take. I can understand why that would be frustrating. If there's a segment, so for example, Tim Pool was arguing that I did that and left out like a 60-second segment, 2 minutes probably, but I went and looked at it, and he's going off on something that has nothing to do with the thesis of the argument that you're presenting. So I don't feel like it's really, it would have affected it. If it would affect the whole video, the flow of it, and it's really because right when he comes back in, you recognize that you just batted aside it, but he pointed that out, and I can understand why that'd be frustrating. But if I did that with anything with Brian, you can point it out for sure.
Yeah, I get. Look, I get that. There's always going to be critical context, which is going to be left out in any video, especially a 7 minute or 9 minute video creating a summarization. I think that that's completely fair. I wouldn't dispute that. Let's start with this instead. The relationship that you have with Brian, right? What do we do here to reconcile that? Because I don't think that you're so far away from Brian ideologically, nor myself, that it's worth having burned bridges. You brought up the Peterson effect, for instance, and I think that this is, you correctly point out that it's very difficult to give anybody any sort of criticism without there being a huge amount of pushback on you for that criticism. Now, that's also fair. That's part of the space, right? But what do you do to reconcile that then? Like, if somebody feels snaked or something like that,
Yeah,
how do you reconcile that?
through a rational conversation. Like when he texted me that day and he was pissed, I was like, "Hey man, let's just jump on the phone rather than trying to go back and forth." He said, "Yeah, I can do it in probably like 2 or 3 days," but it never happened. And I said, "Hey, I'm happy to." I'll be honest, man. I don't know if I'm honored if he was like, "Can you come back on the show to talk to Andrew?" Essentially, and I'm flattered at the invite. It sucks. Like that travel does suck. Perhaps we could do it. It it was rough. I mean, like it took me 36 hours of travel. Not 36 hours of travel, but I was awake for a long time. But we could still do it. I mean, just having a conversation. But if he's not willing to have the conversation, you're right. It does make it difficult.
Yeah, I mean, look, for me, I can only speak from my own experience, right? This space is brutal to me, as you may know. I have people coming at me from every single angle, and they almost always mischaracterize the things that I say for the purposes of essentially trying to do some type of video hit piece or verbal assault or something like this. And I rarely ever even get the chance to speak to my critics. You know, I actually reach out to most of them and say, look, why don't you just let me on and we'll have the discussion? And I think maybe we can make some headway there. And of course, they don't want to do that because the purpose is the hit piece, right? And so I don't, you know, like one of the things about the perhaps miscommunication, and I want to be as charitable as possible to you, that happened here is like, it seems like it's easily rectified. You know what I mean? It seems like it's easily rectified where neither of you need to be at each other's throats.
Agreed.
And you guys can, you know, in some way rectify, because in this space, man, there's not enough friends and there's always a surplus of enemies. Okay.
I agree.